Chapter 1. The Suspicion. It had been a quiet evening. The kind that, at first glance, seemed perfect, but when you looked a little closer, something was off. I sat in the kitchen, watching as my wife, Clara, prepared dinner. She hummed softly to herself, lost in the rhythm of chopping vegetables. Her hair was pulled back into a messy ponytail, and her jeans were a bit too tight, hugging her curves in a way that, for some reason, caught my attention tonight more than it had in years. I hadn't noticed how beautiful she was in a long time. It wasn't a compliment. It was a realization. Clara had always been stunning, but over the last few months, something had changed. She was distracted. She was distant. Our conversations had become forced. I'd caught her in moments of looking at her phone with a strange intensity, but I had brushed it off as work stress or maybe just the growing distance between us. But tonight it hit me. I didn't know when or why, but somewhere along the way, I had started to feel like I was a ghost in our marriage. And a part of me feared it was because she was looking at someone else. The last time we were truly happy together felt like a lifetime ago. After our daughter Lily had been born, we settled into the rhythm of family life, but somewhere between diaper changes and late-night feedings, we lost something important. What had been a passionate love story between two people in their 20s had slowly, almost imperceptibly, turned into a routine of shared responsibilities and unspoken frustrations. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think the worst. But the feeling in my gut, tight, uncomfortable and sharp, refused to let me dismiss it. She seemed to be slipping away, and I wasn't sure why. Tonight, as I watched her cook in silence, I couldn't shake the thought that maybe something had changed in her heart. I could feel the distance between us like a physical thing, and it was growing by the day. "Clara," I said, my voice thick with unspoken tension. She didn't look up, but I could see the shift in her posture, the slight stiffening of her shoulders. She replied, keeping her focus on the pan, the sizzling sound of onions and garlic filling the space between us. I hesitated. The question was right there on the tip of my tongue, but something held me back. I wasn't ready to confront it. Not yet. "How's work?" I asked instead, a safe question, a way to test the waters. She glanced at me, and for the briefest moment, I saw something flash in her eyes, a flicker of uncertainty. It was gone almost immediately, replaced with her usual practiced smile. "Good," she said, her voice light, almost too light. "Busy, you know how it is." I nodded, but the nagging feeling in my chest didn't ease. There was something else behind her words. Something hidden beneath the surface of her smile. As she finished preparing dinner, I decided to take a chance. "Clara, is there something you want to talk about?" I asked gently, setting down the magazine I'd been pretending to read. She froze for a split second, her hand paused mid-air, holding a spoon. Her gaze shifted toward me, but there was a coldness in her eyes that I hadn't noticed before. "I don't know what you mean," she said, her voice distant now, a little sharper than before. My heart sank. The distance was real, and it was growing. I trailed off, unsure of how to say what I was really feeling. "I feel like we've been off lately. Like something's not right." Clara didn't respond right away. Instead, she turned back to the stove, stirring the sauce with a quiet determination. I could see her lips pressed together, fighting whatever was rising inside her. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she sighed, her shoulders dropping. "It's just work, Jack," she said, her voice suddenly tired, defeated. "Things have been stressful. I'm trying, okay?" But even as she spoke, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that it wasn't just work. It wasn't just stress. There was something more. Something unsaid. I took a step closer, my heart pounding in my chest, unsure if I was ready for the truth, whatever it might be. But I had to know. "Clara," I said softly, "is there something you're not telling me? About us?" She didn't answer immediately, and for a brief moment I thought she might say it. The truth. But instead she turned back to the stove, her back to me now. "I think you're overthinking this, Jack," she said quietly. "Let's just have dinner, okay?" But I wasn't okay. And I couldn't let it go. I had to know if she was slipping away from me, if there was something or someone else in her life. The silence between us stretched long into the evening, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing on the edge of something that would change everything. Chapter 2. The Uneasy Truth. The evening passed in a strange quiet, one that had settled like a fog between us. Dinner was awkward, punctuated only by the sound of silverware scraping against plates and the occasional forced attempt at conversation. Clara seemed distant, lost in her thoughts, while I found myself unable to swallow the lump in my throat. We finished eating, and Clara cleared the table in silence, moving with mechanical precision. She didn't offer to help me with the dishes, didn't ask how my day had been. It was the smallest of things, but in a relationship like ours, it was those small things that added up over time. I sat on the couch, watching her move around the kitchen, wondering if she even noticed the distance between us anymore. When she finished, she grabbed her phone off the counter, as if on cue. I hadn't noticed before, but now it seemed like she was always on it, checking messages, scrolling through social media, responding to something or someone. She didn't hide it, but it was like there was an unspoken agreement that we would pretend it didn't matter. But it did matter. "Clara," I said, my voice a little more forceful this time. "Can we talk?" She didn't look up from her phone at first, her fingers swiping the screen with practiced ease. When she finally glanced at me, there was a flicker of something, annoyance, guilt, maybe a mixture of both. "I told you, Jack, I'm just tired," she muttered, shaking her head. "Not everything is about us." The words stung more than they should have. It wasn't just the dismissiveness, but the implication that whatever was happening between us, whatever I felt, didn't matter. I swallowed down the bitterness rising in my throat. "Of course," I said, trying to mask the hurt. I've been feeling like we're growing apart. Maybe I'm imagining it, but something's not right." Clara sighed, setting her phone down finally and rubbing her temples as if trying to fight off a headache. "Jack, I'm just exhausted. You're not the only one who's been feeling the strain. But don't make it about something else." I leaned forward, my hands clasped tightly in front of me. "What else is there?" "Clara, you're shutting me out. We've barely talked in weeks. We never go out anymore. You're always on your phone and you're distant. We haven't been intimate in months." My words tumbled out faster than I intended, and I felt a wave of vulnerability sweep over me, like a sudden flood of emotion I couldn't control. She stood up suddenly, shaking her head. "I don't need a lecture, Jack. I'm just busy. I'm juggling a lot of things right now. Maybe I'm not as perfect as you want me to be, but that doesn't mean there's something else going on." The mention of something else stung. My instincts told me there was more to this than work stress, more than just being tired. I wanted to ask her if she was seeing someone, but the words were caught in my throat. What if I was wrong? What if I pushed her too hard and lost her for good? I stood up too, needing some space, needing air. "I'm not asking you to be perfect, Clara. I just want you to talk to me. I just want us to be us again." She didn't respond, her back to me as she walked into the hallway, grabbing her coat from the hook. "I'm going out," she said flatly, her voice devoid of emotion. "I'll be back later." My heart clenched. "Where are you going?" Clara paused, turning slightly. "Out. I'm meeting some friends. I'll be back in a bit." The door slammed behind her before I could say anything else, the finality of it ringing in my ears. I stood there, frozen, my mind racing. Something wasn't right. It had been months since she had acted like this. The distance, the coldness, the way she seemed to retreat every time I tried to connect with her. It was like I was losing her, slipping through my fingers. I tried to distract myself, clean up the kitchen or maybe watch TV to pass the time, but nothing held my attention. I was too focused on Clara, on what she wasn't saying, on where she could possibly be going. She wasn't just meeting friends. That much I was sure of. The unease gnawed at me as I paced the living room. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening, something that had nothing to do with me. My phone buzzed, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was a message from Clara. "Sorry, I'll be late tonight. Don't wait up. I love you." The words hit me like a blow. I wasn't even sure why. She was being polite, distant, but the part that stung the most was the final sentence. I love you. It felt empty, forced, like something she was supposed to say. I didn't know what to do with all the questions swirling in my mind. I couldn't just sit here and wonder anymore. The truth, it was right there, and I was terrified of what I might find. I grabbed my jacket, my heart pounding in my chest. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I couldn't let this go. Not now. Chapter 3. The confrontation. I didn't know what I was doing exactly, but the feeling in my gut was too powerful to ignore. I needed answers. I needed to know where Clara was, who she was with, and if the unspoken truth I had been dreading was, in fact, true. I slipped my jacket on and left the house, the door closing softly behind me. The cold air hit me hard as I stepped outside, the night sky clear and empty above. It seemed fitting, the emptiness that surrounded me, just like the silence in our house. Just like the silence in her eyes whenever I tried to reach her. I had no plan, no clear destination. I just drove. The streets were quiet, almost eerily so. I passed the familiar corners of our town, each one reminding me of a time when Clara and I were more than just roommates. We were partners, lovers, friends. But those days felt so distant now, like something from another lifetime. After a while, I found myself outside the bar where Clara had once told me she'd met up with her friends. It wasn't like her to go out alone on a weeknight. She had stopped going out with friends after Lily was born, citing exhaustion or just the demands of motherhood. So why was she suddenly out now? It felt off, but I didn't know what else to think. I parked down the street and waited, trying to remain calm as my mind spiraled. What if she was seeing someone else? What if this whole marriage had been a lie? I shook my head, forcing myself to focus. No, I couldn't let my fears take over completely. I had to keep a level head. The bar's neon lights flickered against the cold night air, casting a hazy glow on the street. I kept my eyes on the entrance, willing myself not to jump to conclusions. But then I saw her. Clara walked out of the bar, laughing at something someone beside her had said. My heart sank. And then I saw him. A man, tall and handsome, with dark hair and a casual yet confident posture. He had his arm around her waist. She didn't pull away. She didn't look uncomfortable at all. They were close. Too close. I felt a tight knot form in my chest as they walked together down the street. Clara seemed so at ease, so happy, like she didn't have a care in the world. But with every step, the truth began to gnaw at me harder. She wasn't just out with friends. She was with him. I couldn't stay here anymore, watching them, feeling like I was losing my grip on everything. I turned the key in the ignition and backed out of the parking spot, my mind racing, my emotions a mess. Where was she going? Why was she with him? I needed answers, and I was done waiting for Clara to come to me. I followed them, keeping a safe distance. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight, my knuckles turned white. Had to know. The man and Clara didn't seem to notice me trailing behind them, their voices muffled as they turned down a side street. I kept my headlights dimmed, trying to stay out of sight. They finally reached an apartment building. Clara laughed again, her laughter soft and intimate, and I hated how it sounded, like a distant memory of what we had been. My heart was pounding in my chest as I watched her follow him inside. Her hand in his, fingers intertwined. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. It was like time had frozen and I was stuck, watching as everything I thought I knew about our marriage, about her, shattered before my eyes. I sat there for what felt like hours, my mind a whirlwind of disbelief and confusion. My throat was dry and I could feel my pulse racing. Every part of me wanted to run, to scream, to confront her. But I didn't. I stayed in the car, paralyzed by the weight of the situation, unable to do anything but watch. Eventually, Clara's figure disappeared inside the building, and I was left sitting there, empty and lost. I wasn't sure how long I sat there after that, my thoughts a jumbled mess. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Clara's face, her smile, the way she had looked so happy with him. I drove home in a daze, my hands still trembling. The drive back was a blur. I couldn't think. I couldn't process what I had just seen. I wanted to confront her. I wanted to scream. But I knew it wasn't the right time, not yet. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw Clara's car parked outside, and for a moment I just sat there staring at it. My mind was screaming at me to go inside, to demand answers, to confront her about what I had seen. But my feet felt like they were stuck in place. I didn't know if I could handle the truth. Not yet. Finally, I opened the door and stepped inside, but the house felt cold and unfamiliar. I knew Clara was probably inside, probably asleep, unaware of the storm I was carrying with me. I stood in the entryway for a moment, just trying to gather my thoughts. I needed a plan, but the truth was already sinking in. She had lied to me. She had betrayed me. And I had to face it. Chapter 4. The confrontation. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Clara's face, the way she had looked so carefree, so happy with him. That man. The one who was so casual with her, holding her close like she belonged to him. My stomach twisted in knots. I couldn't stop replaying the scene over and over again. My mind wouldn't let me forget it. I'd spent all night trying to figure out what to do next, trying to decide how I would confront Clara. I couldn't keep living like this, in this half-state of suspicion and denial. I needed answers, and I needed them now. When the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, I couldn't ignore it any longer. It was time to face her, to ask the questions I had been too afraid to ask before. I found Clara in the kitchen, sitting at the counter, a cup of coffee in front of her. She looked tired, her eyes dark from lack of sleep. She hadn't heard me come in, and for a moment I just watched her. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I'd spent years with, the woman who now seemed like a stranger to me. "Clara," I said, my voice rough, betraying the storm inside me. She didn't look up immediately. She took a slow sip of her coffee, her fingers trembling just slightly as she set the cup back down. It was almost as if she already knew what I was going to say. "Jack, please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Can we not do this today?" I stood frozen in the doorway, the words I had been holding in for so long finally slipping out. "Can we not do this?" I repeated. "Clara, I know what's been happening. I saw you with him last night." Her body stiffened, her back going rigid as the color drained from her face. The coffee cup was now forgotten on the counter as she slowly turned to face me, her eyes wide, full of shock and guilt. She couldn't hide it from me. Not anymore. She started, but the words seemed to fail her. She looked away, and I could see the hesitation in her posture, the way she avoided my gaze. "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice harder now, more urgent. "Don't tell me it's nothing, Clara. I saw everything. You were with him. You didn't even try to hide it. Why are you doing this?" The room felt like it was closing in on me as I waited for her to respond. My heart was racing, every part of me desperate for the truth, for some kind of explanation, even if it was one I didn't want to hear. She finally met my gaze, her eyes wet, filled with a mixture of regret and shame. "Jack, I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I never wanted you to find out like this. I didn't know how to tell you." "Tell me what?" I asked, my voice trembling now. "That you're having an affair. That you've been seeing someone behind my back. Is that what you wanted me to find out?" Clara's face crumpled as she wiped a tear from her cheek. "I didn't mean for it to happen this way," she said softly. "It just did. And I know I've been wrong, I know I've hurt you, but I didn't know what else to do." The words hung in the air, heavy and painful, like a weight I could barely carry. I stepped forward, closer to her, needing to hear everything. "Who is he?" I demanded, my voice hoarse. She closed her eyes, as though she couldn't bear to look at me any longer. "His name is Ethan," she said quietly. "We met through work. He's been there for me, Jack. He listened to me. And somewhere along the way I don't know how it happened, but I started needing him in a way I couldn't explain." My breath caught in my chest. Ethan. Another man. Someone who had somehow filled the space I thought I occupied in her life. Clara, how long has this been going on? I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. A few months, she said, her voice barely audible. It started innocently. We just talked. But then it became more. And I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know how to pull away from him. Why didn't you come to me? I asked, the tears welling in my eyes now, a sting that I hadn't anticipated. Why didn't you talk to me? What happened to us? What happened to our marriage? Her face twisted in pain, and she finally reached for me, her hand shaking as she touched my arm. I wanted to, Jack. I really did. But I was afraid. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want to hurt Lily. And I felt so lost. I didn't know how to fix it. So I kept lying. I kept pretending everything was fine. I stepped back, pulling away from her touch. My heart was breaking, and I didn't know how to hold it together. So this is it. This is how it ends. Clara's sobs filled the space between us, but I didn't move to comfort her. Couldn't. Not after everything. I'm so sorry, she said, choking on her words. I never wanted this. I didn't want to hurt you. She paused, shaking her head. I've been so selfish. Selfish. I repeated, the bitterness in my voice cutting through the room like a knife. You think this is about being selfish? You've broken everything, Clara. You've broken me. I turned away, my chest tight with anger, with grief. The world around me seemed to spin, and I could barely keep up with the chaos in my head. I don't know what to do with this, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how to move forward. How do we fix this? How do I fix this? Clara's voice cracked. I don't know either, Jack. I wish I had the answers. But I love you. I always have. I paused, the words hitting me like a tidal wave. But it didn't matter. Love wasn't enough. Not anymore. I don't know if I can forgive you, Clara, I said, my voice steady but cold. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. And with that, I turned and walked out the door, leaving her broken, and a part of myself shattered along with her. Chapter 5, The Breaking Point. The world outside felt colder than I'd ever remembered. The air was sharp and biting as I stepped out into the driveway, my hands shoved deep into my pockets, my breath visible in the chilly morning air. I could barely hear anything, just the rush of blood in my ears and the distant hum of traffic. It was as if everything around me had muted, become surreal. Everything felt like a bad dream. I had always thought that if I ever found out something like this, some truth about Clara that threatened to tear us apart, it would break me. But now that it was happening, I felt numb. Just an emptiness that gnawed at me, eating away at every good memory I had of us. Of who we were, of how we used to laugh and talk and make plans. I was a stranger to her now, and it seemed like she was a stranger to me too. I walked without thinking, my feet taking me wherever the ground led, my mind unable to settle on anything. I didn't want to go home. Not yet. I couldn't face her again. Not after what she'd just admitted. I needed time. I needed to think. I found myself standing at the edge of the park, the same park we used to visit with Lily when she was younger, when everything was still innocent, still pure. I watched as a young couple jogged by, their hands entwined, and it felt like a stab in my chest. Everything was tainted now. Every simple moment of joy felt like a lie. Even the park, with its green benches and laughing children, felt foreign. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, staring at the screen as the cold air numbed my fingertips. A message from Clara had popped up. Please, Jack. I need to talk to you. I know I messed up. I don't know what I was thinking, but I love you. Let's work through this. I stared at the words. They felt so empty. Love. That word had always meant so much to me. But now it was hollow. Like a word thrown out there just to cover the mess she'd made. I didn't know if I could believe it anymore. Another message followed soon after. I'm sorry. Please don't shut me out. I ran my fingers over the screen, debating whether to respond. But in the end I didn't. The pain, the betrayal, it was too much. I couldn't even bring myself to reply. Not when the answer didn't come from words anymore. I had no idea how long I stayed out there, but when I finally looked up, the sun was starting to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the park. I hadn't really processed the day, the conversation with Clara, or even the messages she'd sent. I just felt lost. I needed to see Lily. I needed to hold on to something that wasn't tainted by this nightmare. My mind raced as I thought of her at home. She didn't deserve any of this. She was only a child, and here I was, lost in a sea of adult problems that she couldn't possibly understand. I started walking back toward the car, the distance between me and Clara's house feeling like miles. She hadn't followed me. I knew that. She probably wanted to give me space, or perhaps she was waiting for me to come back and fix things. But I wasn't sure I knew how. How do you fix something that's been broken like this? How do you go back to pretending everything is okay when you've seen the ugly truth? By the time I arrived home, the house felt like a prison. The silence was overwhelming, pressing in on me, making it harder to breathe. I opened the front door slowly, not sure what to expect. But there she was. Clara standing by the couch, her face pale, her eyes swollen from crying. The moment I stepped inside, she rushed toward me, but I stopped her with a sharp gesture. "Don't," I said, the word harsher than I intended. She froze, her eyes flickering with hurt and confusion. "Jack, please. I know I've hurt you. But I can't lose you. Please, we can fix this. We've been through worse, right? We've fought through everything before." "No," I said, my voice unsteady now. "No, Clara. You can't just pretend like it's all going to be okay. You've already made your choice. You've made it clear what you want. And it's not me." "Don't say that," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I never meant for any of this. I swear to you it was a mistake. Horrible, stupid mistake. But it doesn't mean I don't love you. You're everything to me, Jack. Please believe me." I turned away from her, unable to look at her anymore. I couldn't stand seeing her like this. I couldn't bear to see her still holding on to something she had already thrown away. "Clara, love isn't just a word," I said, my voice cracking. "It's actions. It's trust. And you've shattered both." She took a step toward me, her voice barely audible. "I know I've messed up. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make it right. Please don't walk away from me." I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to fix something that had been broken beyond repair. Part of me wanted to believe her. Part of me wanted to forgive her, to try again for Lily's sake, for the sake of what we once had. But another part of me, an angry, betrayed part, couldn't just let it go. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of everything crashing down on me. I felt suffocated by her pleas, by the weight of this marriage that now seemed like a crumbling house. "I don't know if I can, Clara," I whispered. "I don't know if I can look at you the same way again." I heard her cry softly, and something inside me snapped. I couldn't take this pain, this constant tug-of-war between wanting to believe in her and knowing that I had to protect myself. "Maybe it's time we figure out what comes next," I said, my voice hollow. Clara didn't respond, but I knew what she wanted to say, what she needed to say. But I wasn't ready to hear it. Not today. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her alone, broken, just like I was. Chapter 6. The Divide. The next few days blurred together in a haze of silence and tension. Every corner of the house felt suffocating. Every room was filled with things that used to matter. The smell of Clara's perfume in the hallway, the faint traces of Lily's laughter echoing from the kitchen, where we'd spent so many mornings together. Now, all of it felt like ghosts, memories of a life that was slowly slipping away. Clara tried reaching out to me more than once, leaving me messages, calling me. But each time I ignored her. I couldn't bear to hear the desperation in her voice, the way she tried to convince me that everything could be fixed. The truth was, it couldn't. I wasn't sure it ever could. Lily had asked where Mommy was the day after my confrontation with Clara. She was sitting at the breakfast table, her little face scrunched up in concern as she looked at me. I didn't know what to say. The truth. That Mommy had broken our trust. That Mommy had hurt me, that she wasn't the person I thought she was. Lily was only 7. She wouldn't understand. "She's just busy, sweetheart," I said, my voice betraying me. "She'll be back soon." But the look in Lily's eyes, the uncertainty there, made me want to break down. She could feel the change, even if she didn't understand it. Children always know when something's wrong. I didn't know what to do anymore. I'd spent so many years trying to be the good husband, the reliable father, the man Clara could count on. But now I felt like I was drowning. The air was thick with resentment and pain, and no matter how much I tried to push it away, it kept pulling me under. I spent my evenings sitting in the living room, not doing much, just staring at the walls, at the space where Clara used to be. I didn't want to confront her. I didn't want to hear her apologies or her pleas for forgiveness. What good would they do? The trust between us was shattered. There was no coming back from that. It wasn't until the fourth day after everything had fallen apart that I finally saw Clara again. I had just returned home from a long day at work when I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. I glanced out the window and saw Clara's car parked in front of the house. My stomach twisted into knots. She was here. She had come to talk to me again. I hadn't expected this. I stood frozen in the doorway as she stepped out of the car, her eyes immediately finding mine through the window. She didn't come inside. Instead, she stood there for a moment, her posture tense, uncertain. And then, she did something I didn't expect. She walked toward me. Slowly, cautiously, as though unsure of how to approach, like she was scared to set foot in this broken house we once shared. I didn't move. I didn't invite her in. I just stood there, watching her, feeling the weight of every emotion crashing over me. Anger, hurt, betrayal, confusion. I felt like I was on the edge, and I didn't know which direction to fall in. When she reached the door, she stopped, standing just a few feet away from me. I could see the tears still fresh in her eyes, the vulnerability that I hadn't seen in a long time. The Clara I knew, the strong, confident woman, was gone. This was someone else. Someone broken. "I've been thinking," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been thinking about everything we've been through, about the family we've built. And I can't keep running from the truth. I can't keep pretending like I haven't hurt you." I stayed silent, my hands gripping the edge of the door, my chest tight with the emotions I didn't know how to express. "I made a mistake, Jack," she continued, her voice trembling now. "A huge one. But I want to make it right. Can't just throw everything away. I can't throw us away." I swallowed hard, trying to force back the bitterness threatening to spill out. "You already did," I said, the words harsher than I meant them to be. Clara flinched, her eyes filling with more tears. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she just stood there, looking at me as though she was searching for something. Some kind of sign that I might still care, that maybe I would take her back. "I know," she said quietly. "I've ruined everything. But please, Jack. Love you. I never stopped loving you. This affair, it wasn't about you. It was about me and the mistakes I made. I thought I was lost. But I don't want to lose you too." I felt my heart crack. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her that it wasn't enough, that I couldn't just forgive her because she said the right words. But I couldn't. Instead, I just stood there, trapped in my own conflict. Every part of me screamed to walk away, to protect myself, to never look back. But another part, the part that had loved her for so long, wanted to believe her. Wanted to believe that things could go back to how they were. But could they? "I don't know if I can forgive you, Clara," I said finally, my voice quiet but firm. "I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again." Her face crumpled at my words, and she took a step closer. "Please, Jack. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll prove to you that I can be the woman you need. I'll fight for us. I'll fight for our family." I closed my eyes for a moment, the weight of it all pressing on me. I had spent so many years with Clara. I had built a life with her. But I couldn't ignore the reality that lay before me now. I couldn't ignore the betrayal, the broken trust. "I need time," I said, my voice barely audible. "I don't know what I want. I don't know what I need. But I need time." Clara nodded, her shoulders shaking slightly as she wiped her eyes. I understand, she whispered. I'll give you time. But please, don't give up on us. Sorry, Jack. I'm so sorry. She turned and walked back to her car without another word, leaving me standing there, uncertain, alone. And as I watched her drive away, I realized something. I wasn't just hurting because of Clara. I was hurting because I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't know who I was without her, without the life we had built together. But I couldn't keep living in the past. I couldn't keep holding on to something that was already broken. The hardest part wasn't knowing what had happened. The hardest part was figuring out what came next. Chapter 7. Unraveling the Past. The days after Clara left were quiet. Too quiet. The house, which once echoed with the noise of our life together, felt empty. My mind kept racing, cycling through every conversation, every glance we'd ever shared, trying to figure out where everything had gone wrong. I hadn't spoken to Clara since she left that night. There had been no more phone calls, no more desperate texts, no more late-night apologies. It was as if she had truly accepted what I'd said, that I needed time. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight of my own thoughts crushing me. The silence between us wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. Lily noticed the absence of her mother more and more. At first, she'd simply asked where Clara was, but by the third day, she started to cry at bedtime. "Mommy will be back tomorrow, right, Daddy?" she'd asked, her voice small and full of hope. Each time she asked, I had to choke back tears. I couldn't lie to her. I couldn't tell her everything was fine, that Mommy was just at work or visiting a friend. She deserved the truth, but I didn't know how to give it to her without completely destroying her world. But I wasn't just avoiding the conversation with Lily. I was avoiding the one I needed to have with myself. Every time I thought about Clara, about what she had done, a sharp, angry pain pierced my chest. I felt betrayed, hurt, and utterly confused. But I also couldn't deny that a small, foolish part of me wanted to reach out to her. I wanted to fix it. I wanted us to be okay again. But then I'd remember the way she looked at me the other day. The way her eyes had filled with desperation, like she was clinging to some hope that I could forgive her. And I knew deep down that forgiveness wasn't something I could give easily. Not this time. One night, after Lily had gone to bed, I sat alone in the darkened living room, a glass of whiskey in my hand, staring at the empty space where Clara used to sit. I could hear the distant hum of the fridge, the ticking of the clock on the wall, but otherwise everything was still. And for the first time, the stillness wasn't comforting. It was unsettling. I took a long sip of the whiskey, feeling it burn down my throat. The alcohol didn't numb the pain, though. If anything, it made it worse, clearer. The raw, ugly truth was there, lurking just beneath the surface. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. My heart stopped for a moment before I picked it up, my eyes immediately drawn to the name on the screen. It was Clara. For a brief moment, I just stared at her name. What did she want now? Was she going to apologize again? Beg me to take her back? Or was she just trying to keep the line open, in case I ever decided I could forgive her? With shaking hands, I unlocked the phone and opened the message. "Jack, I know this is hard for you, but I need to talk to you. I can't keep living in this limbo. I need to know what you want. Please, let's talk. For real. I don't want to lose you." I exhaled slowly, closing my eyes for a moment. It was the same message, over and over again, just wrapped in different words. The same plea for forgiveness. The same empty promises. But still, a part of me hesitated. Should I reply? Should I give her the closure she wanted? Or the closure I needed? My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment longer. But then I put the phone down, unable to answer. There was too much at stake. Too much to unravel. It was at that moment that the front door creaked open. My head snapped up, and I stood up instinctively, my heart racing in my chest. I hadn't heard Clara's car pull into the driveway, but here she was, standing in the doorway. I didn't know how long she'd been standing there, but the look on her face made everything inside me twist painfully. She was lost, completely, utterly lost. Her eyes were red from crying, her hair slightly disheveled, like she hadn't slept in days. She looked more fragile than I'd ever seen her. "Jack," she whispered, her voice breaking. I didn't speak. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to shout at her, to demand she leave, to make her feel the pain I'd been carrying. But another part of me, one I couldn't ignore, still wanted to hold her, still wanted to believe that we could go back to the way things were. But how could we? How could we go back to something that was already shattered beyond repair? Clara took a step forward, her gaze pleading. "Please, Jack. I can't stand this anymore. I can't stand being apart from you. I know I messed up, but I swear I'll do anything to make it right. I love you." I didn't move. My arms hung limply at my sides as I looked at her, the pain so overwhelming that I almost couldn't breathe. "I don't know what you want from me anymore, Clara," I said quietly, the words like sandpaper scraping my throat. "You've broken my trust. I can't just forget that. I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again." Her face crumpled as though my words had physically hit her, but she kept speaking, her voice full of raw emotion. "I know I hurt you, but I can't lose you, Jack. I don't want to live in a world where you're not with me. Please." I couldn't listen to her. Not like this. Not after everything. My heart ached for her, for us, but the pieces didn't fit anymore. She had broken something inside me, something I didn't know could be fixed. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Clara," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I just don't know if I can ever trust you again." For a moment, she didn't say anything. She just stood there, tears falling freely down her cheeks. And in that moment, I realized that she was broken too. But I wasn't sure if we could heal each other anymore. "I'll wait for you, Jack," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'll wait for as long as it takes. But please don't shut me out completely." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of her words sink in. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if we could fix this, or if we were already too far gone. But the one thing I was certain of was this. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Not for either of us. And I didn't know if I was strong enough to walk it with her. Chapter 8. The Uncertainty. The days after Clara's visit seemed to stretch on forever. I went through the motions of life, work, taking care of Lily, the occasional small talk with friends or coworkers. But inside, everything felt off balance. My mind was a whirlwind of questions, of doubts. Could I forgive Clara? Should I forgive her? Could we rebuild what had been broken, or had we reached the point of no return? I told her I needed time, but time wasn't bringing the clarity I thought it would. Each night, I sat alone, staring at the ceiling in the dark, wrestling with the feelings that consumed me. Anger. Fear. There were moments when I missed her, the woman I had once known. The way she had smiled at me across the dinner table, the sound of her laugh echoing through the house. I missed those simple things, the warmth of our family. But I also couldn't ignore the betrayal, the trust that had been shattered. Lily had started asking more questions, and I hated it. Her innocent curiosity about where Mommy was made my stomach turn. I couldn't lie to her, but I couldn't tell her the truth either. So, I told her that Mommy was working and that everything would be okay. But deep down, I knew the truth was far more complicated. One evening, a week after Clara had stood at my door, I decided to take a walk to clear my head. The cold air stung my face as I walked down the street, my thoughts tangled in the mess of my emotions. I passed the park where Clara and I used to take Lily when she was younger. The same swings, the same benches. Everything felt so familiar, but the memories it held felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me from my thoughts. I didn't need to look at the screen to know who it was. Clara. I'd been expecting this. I had been ignoring her messages, but she had been persistent. This time I didn't hesitate. I pulled the phone out and unlocked it, seeing her name flash across the screen. "Jack, please. Can't keep doing this. I need you to tell me what's going on. I can't keep waiting without knowing where we stand." The words hit me hard. I had told her that I needed time, but time was becoming something I could no longer hold on to. Time was running out. And I could feel it, our silence, our distance, becoming something unbridgeable. I stopped walking and leaned against a nearby tree, staring down at the message. I ran my hand through my hair, debating whether to respond or not. I didn't want to hurt her, but I also didn't want to continue this cycle of uncertainty. I needed answers. I needed resolution. I quickly typed out a reply. I don't know what to say, Clara. I don't know where we go from here. All I know is that things aren't the same. And I can't keep pretending like they are. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. It felt like the right thing to do, but I knew it would only cause more pain. The truth was, I wasn't sure I was ready for what would happen next. I put my phone back in my pocket and kept walking, trying to push the weight of the conversation from my mind. But it clung to me, heavier than before. That night I didn't sleep much. My mind kept replaying everything. Clara's words, her desperate eyes when she had begged me to give her another chance. And then, there was the memory of how I felt when I looked at her that night. Not love. Not forgiveness. Just pain. I was a man torn between two halves of himself. The one who wanted to hold on to the past, and the one who had to face the painful reality of what had happened. The next morning, I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, trying to gather my thoughts when the front door opened. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. Clara. She stepped inside, her eyes red, her face drawn. She looked tired but determined, like someone who had made a decision. Jack, she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. I can't keep waiting for you to decide. I need to know where we stand. I closed my eyes for a moment, the weight of the conversation threatening to overwhelm me. I didn't want to say anything rash. I didn't want to hurt her any more than I already had. Clara. I started, but I couldn't find the words. She took a step toward me, her hands trembling slightly as she spoke. I'm not asking for your forgiveness right away. I don't expect that. I just need to know if there's even a chance for us. Do you think we can fix this? I stared at her for a long time, searching her face for some sign of the woman I used to know. I could see the pain in her eyes, the regret. But I could also see something else. Desperation. And I wasn't sure if that was something I could trust. Clara, I don't know, I said finally, my voice breaking. I really don't know. She stood there, her eyes never leaving mine, but she didn't say anything else. We just stood in silence, two people who once shared everything, but who now felt like strangers. I can't promise anything, but I'll try, I added, the words coming out slower than I wanted. I need time. I need more time to think about this. Clara nodded slowly, as if she had been expecting that answer. But the look in her eyes, the hope that still lingered there, made it harder for me to walk away. I understand, she said quietly. I just want you to know that I'm willing to fight for us. I'll do whatever it takes. And with that, she turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving me alone with my thoughts once more. The uncertainty was back, heavier than before. I couldn't promise Clara that I would ever forgive her. I couldn't promise that we would fix what had been broken. But what I could promise was this. I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. Chapter 9. The weight of decisions. The next few days passed in a blur of quiet tension and unanswered questions. Clara and I had reached an unspoken agreement. She would give me space, and I would try to figure out what I wanted. But the space didn't feel like peace. It felt like a void, one that I was falling into with no clear way out. Every evening I sat in the living room, staring at the same spot on the wall where Clara's picture used to hang. The place where she had always sat, the place where we had built so many memories, felt foreign now. I couldn't decide what hurt more, the silence between us or the constant noise in my head. I wasn't sure I could ever go back to the way things were. And that realization stung more than I had anticipated. Lily, meanwhile, seemed oblivious to the tension. She asked about Clara less, but I could still see the confusion in her eyes. She missed her mother, but I didn't know how to explain why Clara wasn't there. How could I tell my 7-year-old that her mother had betrayed me? How could I possibly explain that something as pure as our family was now broken? I had spent every night the same way. Thinking, drinking, wondering if I was making the biggest mistake of my life. Was I being too harsh? Was I punishing Clara for something she couldn't undo? But in those moments of clarity, I realized I couldn't ignore what had happened. No amount of words or tears would undo the betrayal I felt. Clara's calls continued, but I didn't always pick up. Every time I did, she was calm, but there was an edge of desperation in her voice. She was waiting for me to come to a decision, and I hated that I couldn't give her one. One evening, when Lily had gone to bed, I decided I needed to talk to someone. I needed to hear another voice, to try and make sense of the mess I was drowning in. So, I reached out to Ryan, an old friend who had always been there for me, even when things got tough. He knew Clara knew me. He had seen us as a couple, long before everything had started falling apart. Ryan picked up on the first ring. "Hey man, what's going on?" I could hear the concern in his voice, but I didn't know where to start. "I don't know, Ryan. I'm a mess." "Yeah, well, you've been through a lot," he said. "But I'm guessing this has to do with Clara." "Yeah," I said, dragging my fingers through my hair. She messed up. And I don't know if I can get past it." There was a long pause before Ryan spoke again. "What did she do exactly?" "She cheated on me. With someone she worked with." I felt my chest tighten at the words, the pain rushing back. "I don't know how to get past that. I don't know if I want to." "Damn, man. That's rough," Ryan said sympathetically. "But, Jack, you're the one who has to decide if it's worth saving. You know that, right?" I let out a deep breath. I don't know what's worse, the idea of never seeing her again, or the thought of staying in something that feels broken. "You've been with her a long time," Ryan said gently. "You've got a daughter together. You've got history. But history alone doesn't fix things. You need to think about what you can live with." The truth in his words hit me hard. I knew Ryan was right. I couldn't hold on to Clara just because of our history, our past. I had to think about what my future looked like, what I wanted my future to be. Did I still see a future with Clara? Did I still trust her enough to give her a chance? "I'm scared, Ryan," I admitted, the vulnerability in my voice making me feel exposed. "I don't know if I can trust her again. I don't know if I can ever look at her the same way." "That's fair," Ryan said quietly. "But man, only you can decide if the love you had is enough to rebuild from what happened. And you've got to be honest with yourself about what's best for you. And for Lily too." I sat back in my chair, letting his words sink in. Ryan was right. I couldn't let my emotions control everything anymore. I needed to step back and think clearly about what I needed, what I could live with. It wasn't just about Clara. It was about me. And it was about Lily. "Thanks, Ryan," I said after a long pause. "I needed to hear that." "Anytime, man," he replied. "Just don't ignore what you need. And don't be afraid to make the tough calls." After hanging up, I sat in the quiet of the house, my mind swirling. For the first time in days, I felt a small spark of clarity. Maybe I wasn't entirely ready to forgive Clara, but I needed to be honest with myself. I couldn't keep pretending that things were fine when they weren't. I couldn't keep living in the past. I needed to decide what the future held for me. And for Lily. I wasn't sure if Clara and I could make it. But what I did know was that I couldn't keep waiting for an answer that didn't exist. The next morning I called Clara. My hand shook as I dialed her number, but I knew I needed to have the conversation. It was time. Time to face the truth. Time to stop running away from the decision that I had been avoiding. When Clara answered, there was a soft tremor in her voice. "Jack." "Clara," I said, my voice steady but filled with the weight of everything I had been holding back. "We need to talk." Chapter 10: The Choice. I was surprised at how calm my voice sounded when I spoke to Clara. It didn't feel calm inside. There was a storm in my chest, a tornado of emotions I wasn't sure how to handle. But I had made the decision to talk, to face whatever came next. "Clara," I repeated, forcing my breath to stay steady. "I think it's time we talk about this. About us." There was a long silence on the other end of the phone, and I could almost hear her heartbeat racing through the line. "Okay," she finally replied, her voice low and fragile, like she was bracing herself for something she couldn't control. I sat down at the kitchen table and stared at the empty space across from me where Clara had always sat. The house felt quieter now, even though she wasn't here. Even when she was, there was a quiet tension between us, an unspoken understanding that something wasn't right. But now the silence was different. It felt like the last breaths of something that had already died. "Clara," I said, drawing in a breath, "I don't know what the right thing to do is. I don't know if I can forgive you for what happened. For what you did." Her voice cracked. "I know," she whispered. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I need to know if you can ever forgive me at all." "I don't know," I said honestly. "I don't know if I can, Clara. What you did, it shattered something inside me. And I don't think that's something I can just forget." "I don't expect you to forget," she replied quickly, almost desperately. "But I need you to know how deeply sorry I am. I don't want to lose you, Jack. I know I've made the biggest mistake of my life, and I would take it back if I could. But I can't, so all I can do is ask you to give me another chance. I love you and I want to fix this. I don't want us to be over." The words hung in the air between us, and I felt a lump form in my throat. Part of me that had been in love with Clara for years, wanted to believe her, to take her in my arms and tell her that everything would be okay. But I knew better. I knew it wasn't that simple. No matter how many times she apologized, no matter how sincere her words sounded, the damage was done. I couldn't ignore it. "I don't know how to move forward," I confessed, my voice breaking slightly. "I don't know if I can trust you again. I don't know if I can look at you and not feel this anger, this betrayal." Clara was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her words were soft but full of emotion. "I understand, Jack. I understand if you can't forgive me. But please don't throw away everything we've built together. We've been through so much, and I believe we can still fix this. If you're willing to try." I wanted to tell her it would be easy. I wanted to tell her that, of course, we could fix it, that we could put everything behind us and start fresh. But the truth was, I couldn't promise that. I couldn't promise that I'd be able to forget. I couldn't promise that I wouldn't always wonder if she would do it again. "I don't know what to do with this," I admitted, the weight of it all crashing down on me. "I love you, Clara. But I don't know if that's enough anymore. I don't know if it's enough to make me trust you again." I could hear her quiet sobs through the phone, and it made my heart ache. I hated that she was in pain. I hated that I was the one causing it. But I also knew that if I didn't make a decision, this pain would continue indefinitely. And it wasn't just affecting Clara, it was affecting me, and it was affecting Lily. My daughter needed me to make a decision, one way or another. "I don't want to hurt you anymore," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "But I also can't keep living in limbo. We need to decide if we're moving forward or if we're letting go. And that's a decision only I can make." Clara's sobs softened, and there was a pause on the other end of the line before she spoke, her voice thick with emotion. "What do you want, Jack? What do you really want?" I closed my eyes, my fingers gripping the edge of the table as I thought about everything. The good times with Clara, the way she had always been there for me, the way we had built our life together. I thought about the love we had shared, the connection we'd built over the years. But I also thought about the betrayal, the lie, the weight of knowing that everything we had might have been built on something false. "I want what's best for Lily," I said, finally making my choice. "I want what's best for her, and I need to be able to look at you and not feel like everything is broken. I need to trust you again, Clara. And I don't know if that's something I can do. Not yet." Clara's breath hitched in her chest. "So, what are you saying? Are you saying it's over?" I didn't answer right away. I wasn't ready to give her an answer, not yet. I couldn't make that decision in this moment, not with the weight of everything still hanging over me. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep living like this, in a constant state of uncertainty. "I don't know yet," I said quietly, my voice shaking with the gravity of what I was about to say. "But I need more time, Clara. I need to figure out if this is something I can fix, or if it's something that's beyond repair. There was silence again, thick and heavy. I could hear Clara's soft breathing on the other end of the phone, and in that moment, I realized how much this had changed us. We were no longer the couple we had been. We were two people standing on opposite sides of a chasm, trying to figure out if we could bridge the gap. "Okay," she said finally, her voice barely a whisper. "I'll wait. I'll wait as long as you need me to. I just want a chance." And with that I hung up the phone, unsure of where we were going, but knowing that the road ahead would be long and uncertain. Clara had asked for a chance, but the real question was whether I could give it to her. And deep down I knew there was no easy answer. There would be no quick fix. The only thing I could do was take it one day at a time, and hope that, eventually, I could find my way back to her.